And gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for our very first 2025 Lunch and Learn with our Business Leaders Network members. And I want to recognize Chris Luco, our Director for Engagement here at the Municipal League for member engagement. Amanda Lane is our Deputy for Membership. This is all in her area. And of course, the great technical and expertise help we have from our sustainable coordinator, Bailey Rocco, and the rest of our league team. Our great partner that is a new member of the Business Leaders Network is AccuWeather. AccuWeather is a global weather forecasting company that provides real-time weather data, forecasts, and insights for businesses, consumers, and for local government. It was founded in 1962, offers a range of services including hourly and extended forecasts, severe weather alerts, radar imagery, and delivered through its website, mobile apps, and professional platforms. AccuWeather is known for its advanced forecasting technology, proprietary models, and localized weather predictions. And we're really honored to have our presenter today, Mr. John Porter. He's the AccuWeather Chief Meteorologist and Senior Vice President. He's going to share some tips for municipalities to be better prepared to make decisions on winter storm preparation, which we're all familiar with within the last few days. And I know he'll give us some good ideas and good information. He's a terrific professional. We all know that AccuWeather is headquartered in State College right here in Pennsylvania, so that makes this even more special for all of us. And again, we want to thank AccuWeather, John and his team for joining the Pennsylvania Municipal League's Business Leaders Network. And if you're not participating as a municipality with AccuWeather, now you can do so. If you're a league member, you can actually get a discount. So the AccuWeather team will be happy to give you those details if you're interested. So without further ado, let's get to our presenter, John Porter.
Well, John, thank you very much for that great introduction, and excited to be partnering with you and PML. Here at AccuWeather, we help people, businesses, and governments make the best decisions in all sorts of weather situations around the world, and being able to help local government leaders, many of whom we already work with in Pennsylvania, help make better decisions. That's what we're here to do. Our team of 100 expert meteorologists, as John mentioned, proudly based in State College. And we're going to talk about some of the many ways that we provide unique services and benefits to our partners in local and state governments around the country. So today I want to spend some time on a timely topic around fighting snow and ice. I wanted to take it a little bit from a different direction, though. I want to share some ideas about what lessons local governments can learn from recent disasters, scenarios that didn't go so well in different parts of the eastern United States. And then what does that mean for you as a municipal leader in order to better manage winter storms? And I think we're gonna highlight some of those key aspects here as we go through the presentation today. So our goal for today, I want you to be able to walk away from our presentation today with useful insights for how you think and plan around winter storm threats this year. So we'll discuss the wide-ranging impacts from winter storms in Pennsylvania, specific aspects of storms that can increase the impact and danger, and they might not be what you're thinking about. So we'll highlight some of those and talk about that. Also, as mentioned, what can be learned from recent winter storm disasters, and how have local governments responded differently to provide a better outcome. And we'll detail that. I'll talk a little bit about the update to the AccuWeather exclusive winter forecast, what's ahead for the rest of the winter here in Pennsylvania, and also the importance of utilizing the most accurate forecast from AccuWeather, the proven most accurate forecast from AccuWeather, so you can make the best decision every time, and how you can benefit from the new AccuWeather PML membership. And we'll certainly also leave some time to answer your questions. So a little bit of context for our conversation today. As John mentioned, proudly based here in State College, Pennsylvania, we work with several hundred municipalities, counties, and state governments around the country, as well as more than half of the Fortune 500 firms and thousands of other companies to help them best prepare for severe weather of all kinds, ranging from ice storms and snowstorms to tornadoes to flash floods and to tragically wildfires that we've been dealing with and supporting people, businesses, and communities across Southern California this week as well. We know that extreme weather impacts are increasing globally, driven in large part by climate change. And also, we're finding that severe weather events are often occurring in places and times of the year that are catching people unprepared, off guard, and ill prepared. And so, our goal here at AccuWeather is always to provide the most advanced notice, the most accurate forecast, so you can make those best decisions. And we're also, moving it back into your world, we're finding that local government leaders are facing severe weather events more often and with greater impact. And that is oftentimes challenging preparation and response decisions. It's also resulting in challenges to communication because how to talk about weather impacts and weather risks most effectively so constituents take the needed actions. That's an important challenge that local government officials are facing at a greater scale than ever before. And we're helping government leaders to be able to do that most effectively. Communicating about the weather is a challenging thing, and we have a lot of unique expertise at AccuWeather that we've built over the decades in order to be able to do that. That early preparation and risk assessment on a potential storm so that preparations can begin is so critical. Early notification, more advanced notice that we provide so that you can start activating various aspects of your emergency action plan many days before a storm threat, and then as you get closer to an event and the details become more clear and even more confident. And in a rapidly developing weather emergency, we see many times that local government officials are faced with challenges around the fact that many decisions need to be made proactively, definitively, and quickly, or a particular situation can escalate out of control. And that's where, again, having that best advice and that proven most accurate forecast is so critical. Well, let's step back a little bit and talk about winter storms in Pennsylvania. Well, it's Pennsylvania. We know that we deal with a variety of winter storms. And if you look at the average annual snowfall across the state, you see that the impacts can vary quite often. In any individual storm, we know that that can be the case. Elevation, terrain factors can play an important role. Certainly, the track of a storm and the intensity of that storm can be very important as well. From a climatological perspective, when you look at the 30-year snowfall averages here in terms of the average annual snowfall in Pennsylvania, you see a wide variety, a wide variation from northwest to southeast across the state, with Erie checking in at 104 inches on average there in the far northwestern part of the state. In the central part of the state, Altoona over towards State College at typically around 40 inches of snow up to Williamsport each year in the Central Ridge and Valley section of Pennsylvania. But then, of course, historically, those numbers tail off as you head into the southeastern part of the state, and about 23 inches of snow on average in Pennsylvania. Now, winter storms in Pennsylvania can often have heavy rain and even flooding in the southeastern part of the state, and there can be heavy snow in the central and western mountains, and we can deal with that icy mix of sleet and freezing rain in between. And of course, the number and intensity of storms vary each year, depending upon the weather patterns that can get established during the winter. There can even be those time periods that we've all dealt with here in Pennsylvania where there can be very active stretches, where there can be 3 storms in a week, which can stretch and fatigue resources from local governments that are responding to those storms. And more in a warming climate, yes, we still can get snow. We still get snow and ice risks in Pennsylvania. We've seen that obviously in recent decades. They tend to be spread out a bit more, and they tend to be associated with those times when there's those big dips in the jet stream and a lot of that cold air can pour south into Pennsylvania, and you may have an active weather pattern for a week with 3 or 4 storms, and then you can go the rest of the month without much of an impact. And that may be more what we're dealing with here in our future climate. And of course, the other thing I want to always stress is every storm is different with unique impacts. Please never assume just because you've had other similar storms and the impacts have been X, Y, or Z that you're going to be dealing with X, Y, or Z with this storm. Every storm has its own unique DNA, as I like to say, and it brings its own set of challenges in terms of what type of impacts are going to occur in different parts of the state. The other thing that we deal with here in Pennsylvania is a lot of these icy mixes, and we throw around. I was on the AccuWeather network this morning talking about the snow and ice, the unusual snow and ice that's going to be happening across the southern part of the United States in the coming days. And we sometimes hear about these terms, snow, sleet, and freezing rain. Well, what exactly are these different types of precipitation and what are the impacts? Because they can vary quite a lot. Obviously, snow, we know when we have an atmospheric profile where As you go from the ground all the way up into the clouds, the temperature remains below 32 degrees during the entire profile. Oftentimes, that's going to result in a snow situation, an all snow event. However, the challenges come in when you have these layers of air that's a bit warmer above the ground, and that can be sometimes 5 or 6,000 feet above the ground. There can be a narrow part of the atmosphere where the temperature is above 32 degrees. So it can be like 22 at the surface near the ground here, but it can be 35 at about 5,000 feet or 33 at 5,000 feet. And that can result in sleet or freezing rain. And sleet are those ice pellets that ping off of windows and off of buildings. And that happens when you have a relatively narrow uh, layer of air that's above 32 degrees at about 5 or 6,000 feet. And so what ends up happening is the snow that forms in the clouds melts into raindrops and then refreezes in the cold layer that is present from near the ground. And if that cold layer is deep enough, that's when you get those ice pellets. And sleet, it's a problem. It produces, it accumulates more like snow though, than compared to freezing rain. Freezing rain is a whole different situation where you have a much deeper layer where the temperature is above 32 degrees. And what ends up happening is you end up getting cold air right near the ground. So this is rain. Freezing rain is rain that falls from the sky, but then freezes on contact on cold surfaces. That can be roads, that can be sidewalks, cars, power lines, things of that nature. And of course, that produces a much greater impact. So that sleet, again, you have a relatively narrow depth of above freezing air and plenty of cold air, again, right near the ground. So you'll get a refreeze into those ice pellets versus that freezing rain situation where that rain is freezing on contact on power lines and on trees and things of that nature. And so those icy additional forms of precipitation can add challenges. The other thing about it is just a little bit of freezing rain. You can have scenarios where there's just a little bit of freezing rain, maybe a hundredth of an inch. But on a cold day, when that's falling on cold surfaces like roadways, that's enough to result in highway chaos. So small amounts of freezing rain can result in outsized impacts compared to sleet and snow. So that's something to keep in mind when you're understanding the different types of precipitation that are going to fall from a particular storm. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about snow squalls. Snow squalls are extremely dangerous, and they're often very localized, and they're brief bands of heavy snow. Sometimes they can be only a couple of miles wide. They might last only for 15 minutes, but they can result in a complete whiteout. And that's what I mean. They're, you see on the slide here, they might last in only 10 to 20 minutes in any spot, but the visibility can quickly reduce to near zero, creating an extremely dangerous travel situation that hits quickly. They can also be accompanied by gusty winds. It may look like a blizzard for a brief period of time. The problem with snow squalls is that you can be driving along at highway speeds, 65 miles per hour, for example, like nothing's going on. And then all of a sudden you enter into one of those snow bands and the visibility can drop to nearly zero in heavy snow. And that can also sometimes be accompanied, that can also sometimes occur on the leading edge of a push of Arctic air. And that is a real problem because that can result in a rapid freeze up and a flash freeze where everything, where you have a situation where it's maybe 34, 35 degrees prior to the snow squall, but then drops in the upper 20s and everything turns into a sheet of ice. And that's why we're always concerned about the risk for snow squalls. They can result in a significant immediate travel disruption and roads becoming icy very quickly, and oftentimes result in chain reaction vehicle accidents, such as what happened a couple of years ago. And of course, there's been many examples of this in various parts of Pennsylvania, but this is an example in Schuylkill County along Interstate 81, where snow squall rapidly moved across that area and the visibility dropped to nearly zero, and a chain reaction accident occurred in that area, which was a major pileup. And that's what the snow squalls are infamous for in Pennsylvania. And not only on interstate highways, this can happen on any roadway where the visibility is reduced very quickly. And snow squalls can be tracked like a line of thunderstorms, because they often present themselves on weather radar looking like a line of thunderstorms would, in terms of how you can track that as a feature as the snow squall continues to move rapidly, oftentimes from west to east or northwest to southeast across the state of Pennsylvania. And they can sometimes last the entire state. We've had scenarios where snow squalls will start in Erie along an Arctic front, the leading edge of that Arctic air, and then they'll progress all the way south into Philadelphia County. And they're infamous for resulting in numerous crashes and pileups. And whenever there's a risk for snow squalls, our team of AccuWeather meteorologists, we specifically are highlighting that threat because they are so different from major storms that tend to happen over a wide area and over a long period of time. Now, I want to pause for a minute and ask you a question here, which is, in your mind, which storm could produce greater impacts and greater risks? On the one hand, a snowstorm that produces a foot of dry, fluffy snow that perhaps falls over a 30-hour storm duration. Or how about a snowstorm that produces 6 inches of snow falling in 6 hours with multiple hours of 1.5 inch per hour snow rates? So think about that for a minute. A foot of snow falling over 30 hours, or 6 inches of snow in 6 hours with rates of snow that are falling between 1 and 2 inches of snow per hour. Well, the answer to that one is oftentimes the snowstorm that's producing 6 inches of snow in 6 hours with the multiple hours of 1 to 2 inch per hour snow rates. The snow rate is one of the most important things that goes to driving impacts from winter storms. That's one of the things I've learned in my 20 years here at AccuWeather, is just how important that rate of snow is. And heavy snow bands can really be a real challenge in terms of keeping up with the snow on roads, and they tend to be associated with much greater impacts. So that snow rate, how quickly the snow is falling, is generally much more important than the storm total snowfall in defining impacts. I know everybody likes to understand, to know how much snow is in total going to be expected, and that's important, don't get me wrong. But for defining impacts, that rate of snow oftentimes is very key. And we find that whenever the snow rate exceeds 1 inch of snow per hour, the snow can be falling too quickly for even the most experienced road crews to keep up with. We've probably all experienced this. This is where you're plowing a road and you clear the snow out, and then you feel like 15 minutes later it's all coated and snow covered once again. It's that type of a situation. And we find that those heavy snow bands where the snow is falling at 1 inch or more per hour can be especially problematic if that heavy snow rate is timed with the morning or evening commute, or some other time with increased travel for some reason. For example, concert letting out, a graduation event, holiday travel. So you see, there's sometimes non-weather events that are occurring in your community that, if it's co-located with a time period of one of these heavy snow bands, that can really increase the impact. And I often say that these heavy snow bands are often the difference between a manageable, certainly dangerous, but a manageable snow situation, and one that can quickly escalate into a very dangerous situation very quickly. Even a small amount of snow, like 2 inches of snow, falling rapidly can cause significant issues, especially when it happens at the wrong time. And that's even more pronounced if the ground has been cold, and it's been cold over many days in advance of such a storm. So those are some things to keep in mind. The snow rate is very important. Well, oftentimes people ask us about blizzards. And blizzards are the most powerful, intense, and fierce winter storms. Sometimes people informally refer to major snowstorms as blizzards, but interestingly, there is a strict definition to whether a winter storm rises to the level of being fierce and intense and powerful enough to be considered a blizzard. And that would be when there's gusty winds and reduced visibility due to snow or blowing snow, and importantly, sustained winds or frequent gusts of 35 miles per hour or greater, and falling or blowing snow that's reducing the visibility to less than a quarter mile for 3 or more hours. So there's a strict definition of this, and it turns out it's pretty rare to be able to meet that definition of blizzard in Pennsylvania. It happens during intense lake effect snow bands and intense winter storms with lots of wind and heavy snow. But that definition, it can be hard to actually meet that criteria. So oftentimes we're talking about storms that have near blizzard conditions if that official criteria isn't met, and storms can be just as dangerous. And that's one of the things we're always focused on here at AccuWeather. We don't get wrapped around the technical definition of these terms. We are focused on the impact and what's going to happen in your community. And so that's why oftentimes we'll be talking about blizzard or near blizzard conditions, because if there's gusty winds and a serious reduction in the visibility due to snow or blowing snow, doesn't really matter if it meets that official criteria or not. You're still going to be dealing with those impacts. Travel can become quickly dangerous and life-threatening. And as we mentioned before, even a small amount of rain that's freezing on contact, freezing rain or freezing drizzle, can result in major impacts to the roads. I like this picture from PennDOT. Take a look at that. That looks like just wet roads, but they can oftentimes be frozen and a sheet of ice. And that kind of situation happens where pavement can have ice accumulate on it and look wet, but it's a complete sheet of ice. And that can happen when you have a small amount of rain, even a tenth of an inch of rain, or even just a couple hundredths, freezing on contact when it hits cold surfaces, creating that thin layer of ice. That can be most pronounced on bridges and overpasses and other elevated surfaces, and it's notorious for a risk that can result in many crashes because the roadway can look just wet, but it's actually completely icy, and it's especially impactful if it's poorly timed with a commute or other times when people are traveling. So again, back to the non-weather factors that can sometimes play a role in greater impacts, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. It can also be very terrain dependent here in Pennsylvania. Sometimes the higher elevations can be just dealing with rain, yet cold air can be locked into valleys. In other situations, the higher elevations are colder than the valleys, and the freezing rain impacts can occur in the higher elevation. So just be aware in Pennsylvania, depending upon the specific atmospheric setup, there can be big variations between the lower elevations and even a place that has an elevation that's 100 or 200 feet different. That's how much those elevations can matter here in Pennsylvania. One of the other things that we find has a greater, have different levels of impacts in Pennsylvania is heavy wet snow versus powdery and fluffy snow. And that goes back to the liquid water content that is held up in that snow. And so we oftentimes talk about, on average, 1 inch of liquid water can result in 10 inches of snow. Now, that's just an average, and it's a very significant oversimplification, because some storms, when you have temperatures that are right near 32 degrees, can result in a high liquid water content. That's heavy wet snow. That's the kind of stuff that when you shovel it, it feels like it's concrete, right? And that might be an inch of water equates to 5 inches of snow, versus other situations where there's a much lower liquid water content and you get that dry, fluffy snow, powdery snow that you can just kind of broom off. And in that situation, 1 inch of water might equal 15 inches of snow. So you can see why that 10-to-1 ratio, okay, it's an average ratio, but in reality, there's a big difference in the impacts from that heavy wet snow to a light and fluffy snow. And as far as the impacts are concerned, the heavy wet snow often increases the impacts because that can be like a paste onto surfaces like trees and power lines, oftentimes weighing them down. And just like freezing rain, how freezing rain accretes and accumulates on trees and power lines, that can result in significant power outages. Same thing with that heavy wet snow. That can be a big problem with downing trees that can block roads and certainly result in lots of power outages. And also, clearing heavy wet snow increases the health risks. Heart attacks and snowblower injuries are more common in heavy wet snow than they are in light, powdery, fluffy snow. And so again, the impacts of that heavy wet snow can be more significant. The other thing to point out, though, is that fluffy snow accumulates more effectively, and it's at a greater risk to produce blowing and drifting snow. So when you have situations where it is a powdery, fluffy snow, it can be blown and drifted around quite significantly, and that can also prolong the impacts from a winter storm, as areas that are exposed can get roadways recovered, as snow can tend to blow and drift when it is that fluffy and dry snow, so powdery snow. So you see a little bit of difference there. Again, it goes back to every storm's different in terms of the impacts that can be faced in a particular area. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about a couple of case studies and what, as government leaders, can we learn from the impacts of these recent storms. And the first one I want to talk about is the Buffalo Christmas blizzard in 2022. And I saw this picture, I'll never forget it, in the day after the storm and of 2022. And I thought to myself, with such an excellent forecast, that there was still such an impact in the Buffalo area where people were stranded. And this was a real tragedy. Over 65 people died from this ferocious blizzard that trapped thousands of people in their homes and buried the city in over 4 feet of snow. Tragically, 20 or more people died after being stranded outside or trapped in cars. People were not dressed for the occasion. They were not prepared to be stuck. The situation escalated very quickly into an immediate life-threatening emergency, and people tragically lost their life not being prepared, and being stranded in their cars, sometimes for hours. Many people were caught off guard by the severity of the high winds, the rapidly falling temperatures, and the intense snow rates. Some people, as mentioned, were in their cars without any supplies that they needed, and they were wearing short sleeve shirts and shorts. And the power outages from this event lasted for more than a week. And when you look at the response here and what happened, AccuWeather had issued the most accurate forecast for this blizzard. We warned our customers days in advance about these conditions and indicated specifically that after 7 in the morning, the conditions would rapidly deteriorate. There would be a rapid reduction in the temperature, and that rain would change to snow very quickly, and that the snow rates would accumulate 2 to 3 inches per hour, highlighting those extreme snow rates and that rapid freeze up as becoming a major impact. There was not a complete travel ban issued by government officials until after the worst conditions struck and the travel was already life-threatening. It's interesting, that aspect of it was not well addressed in the after-action reports, in some of the after-action reports, in terms of the proactive nature of the travel ban. And I think that was a major factor that was involved, because people were doing their last-minute Christmas shopping, again, a non-weather related impact or aspect or part of the storm. People were traveling around right before the Christmas holiday, and that was a time of increased travel. And there was hesitancy, and I understand it, I get it. It's a big deal to issue travel bans. But there was a hesitancy, it seemed, to do so before the worst of the impact started. The government officials ended up having to go to a travel ban anyway, but it was after the events became life-threatening and the quick escalation occurred. And I think that was one of the aspects of that, because people in the businesses in that area are certainly very used to dealing with intense snow, but some people were caught off guard by how quickly it escalated from a dangerous but manageable situation to a true life-threatening emergency. And then the impact was amplified because of the calendar. As we talked about, there was more reasons that people were on the roads. And we stressed days in advance before other sources that those conditions would rapidly deteriorate, whereas other sources had been talking about initially in the days leading up to that blizzard that the worst conditions would be only in the afternoon, as opposed to AccuWeather talking about that being from 7 a.m. onward, which is exactly what happened. So some people may have been lulled into a false sense of security that they had time in the morning that they actually did not, in terms of being able to best prepare and be ready for that situation. And again, it goes back to, I think, that aggressive travel bans before the conditions deteriorated may have had an impact and could have changed the outcome, at least in some ways. And I'm very pleased to say that Buffalo, the Buffalo area, both the city of Buffalo Erie County, and to some extent New York State as well, really took a look at this event. And although the travel bans, the proactive travel bans, really weren't addressed very much in the after action reports that were publicly available, all of those entities made changes to their procedures. They strengthened their public communications before events. And they're now more proactive, at least in recent events, that there have been at least 2 or 3 major lake effect storms where the travel bans have been enacted proactively in parts of the Erie metro area, either by the city or Erie County. And they have had a difference. They've made a difference in my mind. There has been no loss of life in these recent events as a result of people being stranded in cars. There have been some fatalities from other aspects of the storm, which are tragic, and we can all work together to reduce those impacts going forward. But there have not been fatalities from people stuck in the storm, like what happened in the Christmas blizzard of 2022. So I think that's a success story in terms of recognizing that being more proactive with those travel bans. I know people get annoyed by them and they're challenging to implement, but putting the travel bans on, even if they're short, focused on the most at-risk time periods, they can change the outcome. And I think the Buffalo really learned from that particular event. And I think that's an example that all municipalities can look at and see how some of those lessons can be learned in your communities as well. Another one was the I-95 snow disaster that occurred back in January 2022. And this was a situation where there was a rapid changeover from rain to heavy, wet snow, again, falling at a rate of 2 inches of snow per hour, back to that extreme heavy snowfall rate. That led to pileups along Interstate 95 outside of the DC area, south of DC, and motorists were stranded in a life-threatening, perilous crisis for more than 30 hours because of a complete standstill on the roadway. People could not get in or out of that particular area. Snow plows could not get through because roads were clogged. AccuWeather was the only source to more accurately forecast 6 to 10 inches of snow. But even more importantly than the most accurate snow forecast, it was the communication and the description of the impacts. And this is what we're so focused on at AccuWeather, to help our local government customers and all of our customers make the best decisions. Everything we do is to think about how to help you make the best decision. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about the communication of that. How are we going to communicate that there's going to be a rapidly worsening travel situation? And this is exactly what we said in our forecast. We stressed rapidly worsening travel conditions with low visibility and slippery roads, and highway chaos may ensue, because we've seen these kinds of situations before, resulting in these types of very serious life-threatening scenarios. This was another scenario where there were no travel bans issued before the event. Once again, travel bans were issued, but they were issued only once the perilous conditions started to evolve. And I argue that by that time, the impact of those travel bans is reduced because people are already in that very serious situation. And then here's another scenario here. Once again, we find, and this has been the case so many times over the years, that in order to get these kinds of disasters, just like it was a whole different scenario, but just like the Southern California wildfires of recent days, you need to get a variety of factors conspiring together to produce the disaster. It has to be almost like a perfect storm. And just like the Buffalo blizzard, same thing with this I-95 snow disaster. Several weather and non-weather factors conspired together. There had been no major snow in that area for years. It was the first commute after the holidays. There was a rapid changeover from rain to heavy, wet snow that created a thin layer of ice on the roads that the snow then accumulated on top of that. Plus, then the visibility was greatly reduced in those heavy snow bands with those rates of 1 to 2 inches per hour. And again, that's what resulted in the stranded cars and trucks on the road. So we here again see a combination of those factors, weather and non-weather factors, conspiring in order to be able to produce the outcome. And I argue that in this event, even a small time period with a travel ban in effect would have resulted in a different outcome here. Obviously, it's a big deal to close Interstate 95. We understand that. We appreciate that. but focusing it on the time period that was at greatest risk and in the areas that were at greatest risk could have had a big impact in terms of reducing or changing the outcome. And then the final case study I want to bring up is the Arctic outbreak that occurred across the eastern part of the United States. It was associated with that same storm that brought the blizzard, the life-threatening blizzard to Buffalo in December 2022. But there was a couple other aspects that I want to point out for you as municipal leaders. And in that case, we had a frigid air that plunged into much of the central and eastern US. It had that rapid freeze up, but then that cold air, that Arctic air, it lasted for days and really challenged the power grid in many places. In fact, there was a peak of 2 million customer locations out of power. Air travel was effectively halted for days to weeks. Of course, that was the storm that had the big Southwest Airlines issue that occurred. And then electric and natural gas grid infrastructure was heavily strained once again. And we saw that just like in the Texas 2021 deep freeze, grid operators and utilities had to issue urgent warnings in order to reduce demand and once again narrowly avoiding calamity. And what I mean by that is it may have been by the matter of just a few minutes in terms of avoiding a complete failure of the power grid. And this once again highlights another extreme weather impact for municipal leaders, not one that you are directly involved in managing yourself, but one that you rely on your utility partners in order to be able to effectively manage the grid and other key infrastructure. And that grid resilience and the risk for amplifying impacts from a major storm when that grid infrastructure nearly fails or fails is a major risk that can prolong impacts for people that are in your municipalities. And I remain very concerned that we're going to have a storm in the coming years that will result in a complete failure of an electric grid in some part of the country. We thankfully have not had that yet, but we've teetered on the edge several times. And I have to point out, this is a report from the North America Electric Reliability Corporation. It's a NERC report. It's available on that website that I quote on here. And I thought this was extremely telling about what happened to Con Ed, the natural gas utility in the New York City metro area during this storm, during the Christmas 2022 storm. They had a precipitous decline in the pressure in the natural gas infrastructure that really threatened a complete failure of the infrastructure. And in fact, that report indicated that had Con Ed declared a gas system emergency, but had Con Ed city gate pressures continued to decline, it was in danger of losing pressure below the level needed to operate the system, resulting in a loss of service to all or parts of the system. And that might have required, that would have placed so many customers, millions of people in a life-threatening emergency in a position of being without heat due to extreme cold and extensive property damage due to damaged water pipes. And the report also indicates that the gas company and their mutual aid partners would have had to go into city home by home to restore the pilot lights, a process that could have taken several months. I read this and it really struck me as the type of grid resiliency and utility resiliency questions that we have in the country. And again, I point that out not for something that's in your direct area of control, but something that also can greatly increase the risks from impacts if the right factors came together with a utility problem of that nature. So as we wrap up here, I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about the rest of this winter, and then also some of the ways that you can benefit from the AccuWeather PML partnership. So briefly on the snow forecast for the rest of the winter, here's the way we expect the winter to continue to shape up here. It's a mixed picture across the northeastern part of the United States. In some places in the far north, above normal snowfall, above historical average snowfall, but along the I-95 corridor in particular, as has been the case in many recent years, below historical average snowfall. And in Pennsylvania, zooming in a little bit, our long-range expert Paul Paslock just updated this map for us yesterday. He continues to indicate above average snow in those northwest snow belts that have been quite active here across Erie and surrounding counties here in recent weeks. We expect above historic average snowfall in those areas. Below normal snow, though, from about Butler County and Beaver County southward through the southwestern part of the Commonwealth, including the Pittsburgh metro area, and also below historic average snowfall from Harrisburg southeastward toward Philadelphia, and near average snow from much of the north central part of Pennsylvania to the Laurel Highlands, where, of course, as we talked about before, sometimes those snow amounts in the mountains can exceed, on average, in a particular year, 80 to even 100 inches in some spots. So for the rest of the winter, we are expecting the risk for another winter storm with some snow around on the January 19th to 20th time period, followed by some colder air and lake effect snow behind that. We look and see generally a low risk for a polar vortex event this year. Of course, that's been a somewhat of a cliche term in recent years, but that's these scenarios where you have a big dip in the jet stream in the eastern United States, and you have a flow of air that brings air way down from the poles and the Arctic right into the eastern United States. And there does look like there's a low risk for that happening the rest of the winter because most of the frigid air is going to be bottled up in northern Canada. But that doesn't mean that there can be outbreaks of cold air from time to time, though they do look on average relatively brief. Then later January into February, we do expect a continuation of this active weather pattern that we've been dealing with here in the recent weeks. But we see more storms coming from west to east and a fairly fast steering flow west to east across the country. That tends to promote lots of mild Pacific air kind of flooding across the country. And so the key question is you get the storms, but do you have enough cold air for there to be snow and ice in Pennsylvania? We think there will be some times where those storms are timed up right with cold air so that there is a snow and ice risk, an impactful snow and ice risk in Pennsylvania from time to time when you match that cold air up with the incoming storms. Probably not every storm, but there can be some active time periods in there. And we also think that March can feature a slower transition than what might be typical or what we've seen in some years, especially recent years, to spring conditions. And that cold and snow and ice risk can linger, though it does appear as though the risk for a major storm is lower than the historic average during the early part of March, but still something that we'll continue to monitor. Shifting gears a bit here as we wrap up, as we look at some of the ways that you can benefit from the new AccuWeather PML partnership, which we're very excited about. AccuWeather has many specialized services that we have provided to municipalities for decades, both services to alert you of severe local storms, damaging wind, tornadoes, flash floods with proven superior accuracy, the most advanced notice on average than any source to help you be best prepared for those types of dangerous severe weather events. And also our exclusive snow warning service that's been trusted and relied upon by municipalities across the country and here in Pennsylvania for many decades. We provide the best, proven, most accurate forecast and alerting service customized to your needs around snow, ice, and extreme cold. Time and time again, we've helped municipalities prevent missteps and mistakes when snow and ice threatens. Safety, budgets, and your reputation, are on the line in every single storm. And we help you mitigate those risks and make the best decisions whenever snow and ice threatens. And that superior accuracy from AccuWeather, that proven superior accuracy is important because when we provide you with the most accurate forecast that's available, that enables you to have the most advanced notice on average and be best informed. And that enables you to make the best decision every time. And it's an umbrella of protection that only AccuWeather can provide that's localized and tailored to your jurisdiction. You don't have to figure out, okay, well, how much does that mean because I'm at a higher elevation? What does it mean for me? Our snow experts consider that, and we issue specific warnings and advice and forecasts for your jurisdiction that take that all into account. With our proactive, specific, detailed alerts, warnings, and advice before the storm, and then, of course, ongoing updates during the storm. And this is another important aspect of what we provide. Other sources talk about what's going on grass and non-paved surfaces. That really doesn't matter to you as a municipal leader who needs to make decisions about how you're treating roadways and sidewalks and other areas of concern. So everything that we provide is focused on how much snow is going to accumulate on pavement and what's the travel impact. And on some storms, that can matter a lot. You can have 4 or 5 inches of snow on the grass and very little, maybe a coating to an inch of snow on pavement. And that changes your strategy. And that's the kind of advice that we're focused on. The other aspect of our exclusive AccuWeather snow warning service that we hear from our customers time and time again is they have our immediate consultation with our phone experts and our meteorologists, including AccuWeather snow warning expert Grady Gilman, who's on the call with me today. In fact, he was advising customers in Pennsylvania and other states today about upcoming snow and ice risks. You have the ability to immediately consult with our snow experts and drill down into any questions that you have. Or we can be on scheduled conference calls with you to help make sure that you're best informed. That consultation any time of the day and night is a very key aspect of the service, and one of the areas that our customers tell us that they value very much time and time again. That's trusted partnerships and trusted relationships that we build with key stakeholders at your organization in order to help make sure that you're best informed. And as we've talked about here, time and time again, inaccurate forecasts lead to a disaster. And we want to help you mitigate all the risks for liability and mitigate other risks that you have in your community as it relates to severe weather events, including snow and ice. And we've seen time and time again, if a municipality isn't using the AccuWeather snow warning service for snow and ice, they're not using the best, most accurate forecast and risk not making the best decision every time and risk ending up in one of those particular situations where a organization or a municipality is not best prepared. And our stats prove it. That proven superior accuracy is really critical. We have many different proof points of that success. We have a 2023 study that shows that AccuWeather was 68.7% more accurate than any other weather source. On snow and ice, last winter, our start and end time for snow and ice forecasts had an average error of only 1.5 hours compared to an average error of more than 3 hours from other sources, meaning that AccuWeather was at least twice as accurate. And our independent studies always continue to show that our forecasts are significantly more accurate, more detailed, more specific, and more valuable than any other source. And that's why AccuWeather has a 97% annual renewal rate for these services, because businesses and municipalities rely on them to make the best decision. Now, a little bit about how that snow warning service works. And we provide, of course, as mentioned, the proven most advanced notice on average, but then updates through the storm so that we can tell you about any changes to our forecast thinking, any changes to the impacts that are expected. We start by issuing an alert, a preliminary forecast that's typically issued when an approaching storm is more than 24 hours away, but often 36 to 48 hours or more in advance. That gives you a heads up about impactful snow and ice so that preparations and planning can be initiated. And then we issue a warning typically between 18 and 24 hours before snow and ice that is going to accumulate on the roads or in case of any ice accumulation so that your preparation and planning can be implemented. And of course, we update those warnings as appropriate throughout the storm. We also, very importantly, issue a wide variety of advisories too. And those are more informational messages that we provide. They're not always a call to action that you take a specific action. That can be for situations where snow can be generally on the lighter side, maybe an inch or less, or when the customer is going to get some snow, but a major plowing operation is not expected. We also provide advisories when freezing rain or fog might be a concern, or when there could be a refreeze concern, or a more localized threat of snow or ice causing problems. And here's just an example of one of those types of alerts. This is a steady snow warning for a specific municipality. Your municipality will be listed there. Notice it's not for a wide area, it's specifically for your jurisdiction. And we provide a start time of when we expect the snow or ice to accumulate on pavement and when we expect that it's going to end. So you know exactly what's going to happen in your area, when it's going to happen. and we provide very useful commentary. It's not a book. It's very focused on what the impacts are going to be. And we talk about how much snow is going to fall, what's the risk for a little bit more, a little bit less. We highlight, as we did in this particular warning, when heavy snow of 1 inch per hour or more is going to start and end, and that the snow is going to be a wet snow, and what kind of conditions we're expecting. That main roads can be snow covered and slushy, whereas secondary roads can be snow covered. We also talk about the weather following the storm, and if temperatures or wind are a factor, we'll be mentioning that as well. So again, all highlighted to your specific jurisdiction, highlighting if there's going to be a mix and change to sleet and freezing rain or over to rain. We provide details about the timing associated with that, any changeovers, and of course, any variances that are expected across your jurisdiction. All information that's tuned for municipal governments, local governments, to be able to make the best decisions. And here are some of the reasons that governments have trusted and relied on AccuWeather for decades to do this. Because of that proven superior accuracy, virtually eliminating the chance of you being caught surprised or unprepared for snow or ice, enhancing safety, scheduling personnel more effectively, minimizing overtime and material costs is really important. Sometimes not reacting to a storm that is not a threat at your area is just as important as reacting to an actual storm threat. And we have had many of our municipal customers tell us that our service pays for itself over sometimes 10 or 15 or 20 times or even more because of the fact that we're able to help you focus and not have crews being paid overtime at times when there actually is not going to be snow or ice accumulating. So that superior accuracy and making the best decision really affects your ability to continue to enhance your safety of your constituents, make sure your roads are in best condition as possible, while at the same time being fiscally responsible, minimizing overtime and material costs, and eliminating unnecessary preparation for storms that are not going to materialize, while also helping you to reduce your liability, which is really important as well, and helping you to think about how to best communicate impacts in your jurisdiction. And the final slide I want to hit on, John mentioned this already. We're very passionate about helping people make the best decisions. And we are very passionate about helping local and state governments. Obviously, we do that around the country, but we're especially proud of being able to do that here in our home state of Pennsylvania, where our team of over 500 team members is the majority of our team located. Of course, we have people all around the country, but we have many team members located here in Pennsylvania. And we're passionate about working with you to help you enhance safety and be best prepared in Pennsylvania, in all of our municipalities in Pennsylvania here. And I'll tell you, we are always very excited about the passion that local officials have for being best prepared and for keeping your constituents safe. And that's a passion that equals AccuWeather's passion for doing the same. And when we work with governments that are, and municipal leaders that are passionate and excited about that, that really makes us happy, and it makes us proud to have a greater impact. And to be able to do that here in Pennsylvania, we're very excited about that, which is one of the reasons that I was excited about approaching John Brenner about that opportunity for us to work with PML in a stronger manner to enhance your ability as government leaders to make a positive impact in your community. That's exciting for us. And as John mentioned, we're pleased to be a new League Business Leaders Network member, meaning that if you're a League member that's not yet subscribing to our world-class snow warning service or the AccuWeather SkyGuard severe weather notification service, as mentioned, all tailored to your needs in your municipalities, and that includes consultation with our severe weather experts, you have the ability to get those services and engage and purchase those, license those services at a League discounted rate. In order to do that, contact Lou Seidel. Lou.seidel@AccuWeather.com. His contact information is listed right there. Lou has worked with municipalities in Pennsylvania for decades as well. So he would be happy to engage, provide you with a quote for our services, and help you to engage those superior services to help you be best prepared in your community. The other thing that we will be doing as part of our PML partnership is that we are going to be providing in the biggest storms. And remember, we talked about here that impacts, the dangerous impacts can occur anytime snow and ice is a factor, which is why those municipal specific services that we provide are so important. But in the biggest storms, AccuWeather is also going to be providing exclusive PML webinars for PML members, briefings about the storm impacts. And we'll do that probably a handful of times every year on the biggest storms, not only in the winter, but also flooding threats or big outbreaks of severe thunderstorms and an increased tornado risk across Pennsylvania, or any kind of tropical storm or tropical rainstorm impact with significant impacts in Pennsylvania. We will announce those as the storm threats come up. AccuWeather meteorologist Grady Gilman, as I mentioned, who's on the call with us today, he's going to be working with me to facilitate those webinars. So stay tuned to your emails. We'd love to have you join those webinars as those opportunities come up. And again, we'll be focused on working with your sustainability team and the regional groups within PML to help increase your resilience to severe weather events across the state of Pennsylvania. We know with the changing climate, and as mentioned, more extreme weather events, that's going to be really important. So I personally, as an AccuWeather meteorologist, I think that that the collaboration between meteorologists and local government officials, increasing that kind of collaboration, both on blue sky days when we're talking about weather threats and how to best react to them like we have today, and also in the moment in storms, will be very helpful in terms of providing you with the best information so that you're able to best serve your communities and your constituents, which you are so passionate about, which we're really excited to be a part of that as well. So I know that's a wide-ranging set of topics around snow and ice and the threats that various communities face and how you can best manage those with AccuWeather's unique services. Thank you for participating in that today, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions or comments that you might have. With that, John, back to you.
Thank you so much, John. We appreciate that wonderful presentation, and we want to thank AccuWeather for being a wonderful partner with the Municipal League. We hope this is a value for all of our members and that more and more municipalities, cities, boroughs, and townships take advantage of this opportunity. If you have questions for John or the AccuWeather team, feel free to reach out to them. All the contact information for our business leaders is available at pml.org. So please feel free to utilize that anytime you need it. Our next Lunch and Learn will be January 28th at 11:30. Aspirant will talk about reducing risk and limiting liability, the role of police accreditation, and policy development, another important area for municipal government. Again, thank you to AccuWeather, and thank you to all of you for taking the time to be with us today. Take care and stay safe.